to LMU. My name's Tom Klein.
Is it?
I'm one of a
Hey,
number
mine
of
works.
faculty here. And this is, we consider this kind of a place in the history of animation because one of our truly most distinguished alums of this program was also faculty here. Van Partible over there. The first time that the world ever saw Johnny Bravo happen right here on that screen. So we're pretty excited to have you share that moment in history right here. But I want to turn this over right away to our guests and to Aubry Mintz and Tom Sito, who are the co-chairs of the steering committee of the ASIFA Educators Forum. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys all for coming to this talk. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I can teach.
Well, I mean, it might. Is it going into the stream?
Can you hear me now? There we go. Hi. So, yes, my name is Aubry Mintz. I'm the co-chair of the ASIFA-Hollywood's Animation Educators Forum. Thank you all for being here. Yes, it is. We can hear some sounds up in the booth, I think. You hear my co-author, Ellen Besen.
Across the nation and around the world.
From Canada. Guys, thanks for taking time on a Saturday, especially Saturday morning, to join us and talk about animation education. It's something that's obviously very close to our hearts and something we're very passionate about as educators. And the Animation Educators Forum on its own has been together for, oh gosh, Dory, I always forget this part, 10 years? 10 years? When did we have that martini?
I know. Yeah, it's got to be about 10 years ago.
Yeah, about 10 years ago. It was just a few of us, Dory, Tom, Frank Gladstone, and we just sitting together thinking, you know, we need a venue to be able to talk about animation education. You know, we were all either professors or chairs of the programs, and we were stuck in our own little worlds, and Patrick was there. There he is. Patrick was there. We just needed a way to talk about this. So we started the Animation Educators Forum. And about 3 years later, I think we ran a student animation festival at Cal State Long Beach. And that's when ASIFA-Hollywood got on board. And they started supporting us. And they've been our sponsor ever since. And we just keep growing. Every time we have an event, we do an event 3 or 4 times a year. One at SIGGRAPH, one at CTN, and then this general membership meeting. And every time we have an event like this, we get more members. So hopefully you guys will join us. We are an online forum, and anytime anyone has a question about anything animation education related, you just post it, and you get tons of responses from all over the world, which is great. And then we get to meet in person at these types of events to get to know each other. So I just want to introduce the steering committee, because these are the people that spend a day, a Sunday, every month. We just get together on Google Hangout and talk about initiatives and things like this to start up. So myself and Tom Sito, Dory Littell-Herrick over there, Patrick Dupree over there, Mark Farquhar back there, Chuck Grebes, and Lee Crow. There she is, Lee Crow. And then Kathy Bauer and Adriana Jarakowicz. Did I say that right? Jarosevich. She actually is, I think, 35 weeks pregnant, and she's sitting at home. Maybe she's watching this. Hi, Lee. Hi, Adriana. Hope you're well.
She's busy dilating right now.
Yes, she is. That's what we're going to talk about today. So today's topic, we decided to throw it out to our forum and ask what are effective strategies in the classroom, or in or out of the classroom. And we had several responses and of ideas and proposals, and we chose 6 of them, and that's who's sitting before you right now. And we're all going to take probably about 15 minutes to present, or 10 minutes to present, and maybe about 5 minutes to open it up to discussion. And then we're going to have some lunch, and then come back and discuss more. So without further ado.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in too and just say that this thing right? Yeah, it is. The origin, like Aubry mentioned about the origin of this thing, is that we suddenly thought people are teaching animation from like UCLA to Channel Islands, from Woodbury, from Laguna, San Diego to Santa Barbara, and then across the country, and we noticed a lot of the animation faculty don't talk to one another. Well, they talk to each other, like within their own school, but they don't like talk to other folks. And then, like we know from those of us who work professionally in the industry, there's always a lot of back and forth in the studios where, you'll be working at Warner Brothers, you'll be working at Disney, you'll be working at DreamWorks, and it's kind of the same people. And the faculty is kind of the same way. It's like but yet there wasn't that much interaction between faculty. So we thought this would be kind of a fun way to kind of get together and just compare notes and just, do you have Xeroxes of Babbitt's notes from the Richard Williams lectures? Yeah, I do, or just whatever, whatever's back and forth. But just basically to get a dialogue going and just get a discussion, and then we might learn something, or it might be fun just to have the shared mutual experience. So let me turn it back over to Aubry. And
I think we're ready for the program.
We're ready. Okay, all right. So our first presenter is this guy named Aubry Mintz. It's like, and which one? I'll translate for the Canadian impaired. It's when he says about, that's the official one, but so anyway, Aubry, go right ahead.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for that glorious introduction.
Okay. Well, let me just. Let me do an official. So yeah, he's the chair of animation at Cal State University Long Beach, and you were one of the people that helped put together the program at Laguna. I think after Chuck Jones passed away, and it went through some stuff, and you did a really nice job there organizing the program there, and now he's done an equally great job organizing the program at Cal State Long Beach. It was Steven Spielberg's old alma mater. So Aubry Mintz.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to talk about initiatives outside the classroom. When I was at Laguna that Tom talked about, it was initiated by Chuck Jones. And, I walked in there from Canada expecting to be all these like Chuck Jones prodigies working their butts off all the time, working harder than me. But I found a little bit of the opposite at the beginning. It was kind of a mixed bag where you had students working super hard and some kind of not really present at all. I'm sure you guys have all experienced that before. So I really need to find an initiative to really get people to work harder. And so I put out a challenge to them and said, I'm not going to leave until the last person. I'll stay until the last person stays. Let's call this a challenge, and we'll see who stays the latest. And it was a class of probably about 15, and they all petered out at say 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. But then 5 students stayed, and they kept working on their own stuff, and they were challenging me and wondering if I would do it. And we ended up watching the sunrise. And it was one of those kind of aha moments as a teacher where I said, okay, this is kind of what motivates them. It's a challenge. So I decided to do this every year. And I ran this 24-hour day where it just started as a let's animate something, or let's give them a prompt to animate something. And so I found that every year I'd get more and more students involved because for some reason students wanted to like stay up all night and challenge themselves. And they weren't getting paid or anything or a grade, but it was just something that I think they wanted to rise to the challenge. So now I've been doing it for I think 12 years, and what started as 5 students is now there's about 260 students from 13 different schools, and other schools really liked it, so we get a professor from each school to kind of run it at their own home school. And we have amazing sponsors now from DreamWorks and Disney and all these great places that give them prizes. And it keeps growing. So I think it's one of these things where I noticed, okay, it's okay to do something outside of the classroom, and students will respond to it. And I feel like they're owning it, and they're looking at it as this is their initiative. They work in groups, and they find it together. So I'm just going to show you a 7-minute kind of documentary made at our school about the event, so you can get more of an idea about it. This is called anticipation. It's one of the principles of animation. It's the Vimeo link. I'll just talk a little bit more about it while we're waiting. And so the students are put together in teams of 5. They can create their own team. And then I give them a topic at 5 p.m. on a Friday, and they have till 5 p.m. on a Saturday to complete 30 seconds of animation. It usually starts out as a line test the first few years, but now we have full-color animated films in 30 seconds. You know, the quality varies, of course, but for the ones that win the grand prize, they're always, they blow me away. I mean, what they can do when put to the test. And I tell my students, you know, you guys do more in this 24 hours than you do all semester. And sometimes it's true. There it is. Thank you.
My name is Aubry Mintz. I'm an associate professor of animation at Cal State University Long Beach. And this is 24 Hours. The goal is for students to get into a team of 5, and they'll have 24 hours to complete a 30-second animated commercial. Now, usually a 30-second animation commercial takes anywhere from 3 to 4 months in the professional world, but these guys only have 24 hours. The end result is not to have a finished, completed, colored film, but more of a rough animation line test that you might see in a work-in-progress film. So at 5 p.m., I gave the students a topic, which was Nobel Peace Prize and how to win one. And they can interpret that in any way that they want. They can take it totally literally and research what you need to do to win a Nobel Peace Prize, or they can create an interpretation of what they think someone would need to do to win a Nobel Peace Prize. So the students will start with brainstorming, and they will probably spend 2 to 3 hours just getting out as many ideas as possible. Now the trick is that it has to be told within 30 seconds, which is not a long time. So if you watch any commercial on TV, usually they're around 30 seconds. And you can see that not a lot happens. So that's one of the constraints the students have to deal with. Once they have their idea, then they'll either split up and divide the jobs amongst them or work on them all together. And the first thing they'll do is storyboard. It's the pre-production part of commercial is creating basically your commercial in still images. You know, we call that a storyboard. And you're trying to figure out the pacing of your film. You're trying to figure out all the main scenes and what the camera angle is. And you would film that in the camera room and see that it works just as a storyboard first before animating anything. At the same time, another student can be designing the characters, designing the background, designing the look of the film. The film should have some sort of cohesive style or cohesive look to it, and so you probably have 1 or 2 people in charge of that. Once you have your storyboard and you have your character designs and your backgrounds designed, then you can start animating. At 24 frames a second, there's quite a few drawings. 720 frames in a 30-second commercial. And so you can either do that many drawings or half that many, and it will work out as well. So I think one of the harder things for students in this contest will be not being able to produce exactly what they saw or exactly their first idea that they had. So learning to compromise your vision, I think that's a real difficult one. For the sake of the project, for the sake of getting something done in time, meeting a deadline. At the end of any film in the studio system, they have what we call crunch time. You know, oftentimes, whether you're working on a job or in a studio system or in the school environment even, you're forced with deadlines, and you're forced with needing to hand something in a certain amount of time. And learning how to do the best you can and be as creative as you can within that time constraint is a special skill to have.
Hi, my name is Tim. It's 4:20 right now, and I'm feeling exhausted, completely exhausted. The only times I got to rest was when I knocked out, and then they just woke me up to go back to work again.
Hi, I'm George Fleming, and I am a member of the graveyard shift. It is about 4:29 at the moment, and right now our team is looking pretty good. We are putting our movie together as we speak, and we should be done very soon, and we're gonna all go home, take a shower.
You know, it's simple as changing a light bulb from something that, you know, eats away at the earth to something that's recyclable, energy friendly. And then from that,
We can cut there.
turning something bigger and better things. So it can be any place no matter where you're at in life. And so I think we have an overall message. Cycling, many of you have to draw that. I want to give thanks to Aubry.
Cut. Stop. We're good.
For all of us that this opportunity. And we all got a lot out of it. But just a lot of work.
Cut. Yeah, cut. Great. Okay, well, I was going to show more, but let's stop there because of time and move on to our next presenter, unless anyone has any quick questions about the contest. Chuck?
Well, actually, we kind of want to put questions at the end so we can include people online.
Till the very end?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. So let's just move on to the next presenter. Thank you, guys. There's 24 hours.
Our next presenter is Jose Garcia-Moreno, who is an associate professor at Loyola Marymount University, is an award-winning filmmaker, and has had stuff exhibited around the world. And let's hear from Professor Moreno.
I improvise a little bit here because it's a little bit harder to, go through these pages and people stand up. So it's easier to actually stand up. So, one of the things that was very interesting for me, coming from Prague, that I went to film school in Prague and then to UCLA, what I found, and I was born obviously in Mexico City, is that culturally speaking, what I found very interesting about the society is that we always privileged the director over the orchestra. and the hero, the single hero, is gonna eventually save us all. So I started going to Annecy after I screened my first film there, probably by the turn of the millennium. And what I constantly was seeing that really caught the attention of my eyes were those films that actually were produced specifically from two countries, and that was Germany and France. And the common denominator that I found there was that obviously that there was great design, great stories, great animation, but there was a credit that actually involved the group. It was not like a single person. So when I came to LMU in 2003, what I found here, which I felt very comfortably because I actually went to UCLA as well for a master's, was that pedagogically speaking, the approach that was heavily ingrained in the curriculum here at LMU was what Dan McLaughlin actually used at UCLA, which was one student, one film, which is the film auteur kind of philosophy. And I was very comfortable with it, but also what I saw is that what we were lacking was either a curricular or systemic model that actually promoted collaboration and teamwork. So I proposed to the animation faculty a curricular innovation in the sophomore year that will actually require students to enroll in a class that created a model that which purpose was collaboration and group projects. And this actually was like this snowball that actually triggered all these social dynamics and changed the culture of our department for the better. So, and also it created this identity which actually tied down with the mission of this university, which basically is diversity and social justice. So, and I thought that the only way that we can actually corner and say something that was very unique to us was, and truthful and valid at the same time as who we are as an animation school, was precisely to create this pedagogical attempt in which its nature by itself was diversity. But also within diversity, how can you preserve individual artistic growth within the context of a group project that actually superseded personal benefits? So the great question, the great pedagogical question, and the conundrum or the problem of doing this was that difference in a group can be extraordinary, right? It can be not only race and gender and ethnicity, but also can be like concrete versus abstract, or sequential versus random, or introverted versus extroverted, or personality, or even mental disability, or intellectual characteristics, self-esteem, motivation, creativity. There are so many differences that you can find in diversity when you're trying to design a class with this approach. And the problem, obviously, with diversity is that no teacher, and obviously you have experienced this, is capable of taking into account or teaching to every form of diversity, right? Because it's obviously impossible. I mean, you can have either extensive coverage or deep learning. So the problem here is focus, right? The dilemma of the problem is, how do we deal with focusing in something? And what I thought about was critical thinking, because critical thinking, what makes you when you confront critical thinking and start using critical thinking in the way that you teach the class, so students are actually able to implement critical thinking by themselves, is because you're reflecting on your own thinking process. Because diversity, multiple diversities, is never if you have like a Noah's Ark. That doesn't make diversity. Diversity is the way in which you think about diversity, right? That's what makes you a diverse group actually thinking and being open without prejudice to other ideas, right? So what we were doing with 220 is that we are actually reflecting on our own thinking, which is animation thinking, right? So how do you think in terms of animation within the context of social justice and diversity? So basically what we were proposing is to do tools of the mind. So what makes us really diverse is not by adding multiple diversities, but by creating individuals that actually reflect on diversity through critical thinking. So human diversity obviously is the source of storytelling, right? How critical can you be through a series of issues and reconcile content with critical thinking? Because reasoning is the focus of the proposal, right? You have to reason through ideas, which involves actually predictable parts and elements, but basically, if you actually go into Aristotelic logic, basically what you're trying to do in critical thinking is that you're bringing universal intellectual standards, right? So it's good reasoning versus, and this is a big point about trying to create a class that actually incorporates groups is good reasoning versus egocentrism, right? So how do you come across your ideas that it should be your own idea, and that idea should be expressed regardless of the others, right? So everything becomes meaningful content because you have to reformulate yourself and reason through it to actually achieve something that actually is diverse, right? How do you formulate questions within the subject themselves? And how do you learn to think for yourself in terms to others, right? So it's about your history. You're bringing into the class not only fundamental classical principles of animation, but you're bringing yourself as an author, right? So it's what they said, historians said that we are history ourselves, right? If you think in terms of critical thinking. So what is it that you do when you start doing critical thinking is that the technique is that you formulate questions, right? Am I being clear? Am I being accurate? Do I need to be more precise? Do I need to consider another point of view which actually creates a breadth and you incorporate others' points of view into your own? Am I dealing with the complexities that are inherent to the question, right? What the hell are we doing with this little project, right? Am I thinking logically or illogically in my own insanity, right? Am I thinking in a way that is justifiable or fair to others? So is it believable and truthful to its own nature, right? So even in the logical of fantasy, you can actually come through and reason through the logic of your fantasy. It is a rat that dreams of becoming a chef. So if that is a proposal, then he must stand on twos and wash his hands, right? So whenever we think with a purpose. So the purposes are intellectual standards, and there's the quality of reason. So the barrier, as I said, is not only egocentrism, but sociocentrism, right? Because the way that the mental habit of us is self-serving interest, because that is a matter of survival. So how do we deal with egocentrism is that you enable a point of view that because you're egocentric, you're enabling a point of view that justifies and rationalizes your own actions, right? So, for example, there's no global warming, right? So we believe it's true if you're egocentric because you believe it, right? So it's a mental habit. But it's not only that it's you, but it's also sociocentric because there's this thing that we do that we form clans, right? So you can have the idea of diversity with a group, but that group can still be egocentric in itself, right? So it's thinking about thinking. So basically the intellectual standards are clarity, accuracy, precision, significance, relevance, logicalness, breadth, completeness, fairness, and depth. And those are applied to what they're called the elements. So what are the elements? Are the purposes. What is the purpose, right? What is the inference? What is the question? What is the point of view? What is the information that I'm using? What are the implications? And what are the assumptions? Because as we learn through this process of thinking our own process, what you trigger and what you learn is, first of all, humility. The second is autonomy of your intellectual process of thinking, integrity, because you're validating others beyond who you are and your own self-interest. There's courage, because there's always courage in becoming humble in the process of accepting that probably your standards are not the same as the others, and you recognize that those standards are not the same. There should be intellectual perseverance, because you have to come through overcoming frustration and the problems that are born within the process of the group. So there's confidence in reason, that reason is going to take you to the solution of the problem. That creates intellectual empathy, not only within the group, but also not only within the group that you're working, but also within the class. And that takes us to fair-mindedness. So basically that's the point, and we can expand later on, but I don't want to take more time because I know that we are time constricted. So this is a little bit of a taste of what has been done in the 220s, which also elevated the value of production, and it created this dynamic, which is very interesting, which sophomores were actually started bringing in freshmen to collaborate into their projects. So it created this culture of community, which has been probably the essence of who we are at LMU.
That's great. Great. Okay, our next speaker is a joy for me to introduce because a former student of mine at UCLA, and his name's Joe Meuris. And Joe's worked around in the business and was in Montreal at the National Film Board, and worked on a number of different films, and is currently as a faculty at Nevada State College. So, Joe, take it.
Can I get my PowerPoint, please? Oh, and I need the clicker thing. Okay, hopefully this is going to work. Can you guys hear me? Okay, so I'm from Canada. That's what that is. We have to shovel off our roof. I moved from Montreal to Las Vegas to launch the animation stream at the Visual Media program at Nevada State College in October. It's a brand new program on a brand new campus. The campus is only about 13 years old. Currently, we have one building. They're constructing two more, which we're hoping will be open in September. And the animation program is brand new, so they brought me in to start it. They've pretty much given me, this is just our campus, brand new, and they pretty much gave me free rein to do whatever I wanted with the animation program there. Our population is kind of unique. We have a lot of non-traditional students at our school, a lot of students who, they are the first ones in their family to go to college. We have a lot of adults who are returning to college for the first time, and just really interesting student population. And our visual media program is still small. There's two of us in the faculty, and yeah, animation is brand new, and so yes. Okay, so coming in, because our animation program is so new, we don't have, we can't really cherry pick our animation students. So we have students taking animation courses from every other program. So I had nursing students in my classes, I had history students, and the Animation 1 class was the very first class that we taught. It was meant to be a criticism course, but I found that a lot of the students didn't really have an appreciation for animation beyond cartoons are fun. I think some of them maybe thought it was going to be a Mickey Mouse course where they just came in and got to just watch cartoons and that was it. Their very first animation papers, some of them, it was kind of sad because they came back with value judgments like computer animation is good because it's new technology and computers are better at animating than people. Yeah. And also black and white cell animation is bad because it's old. Which was just really sad because they just had no basis for comparing it to anything. Animation is so ubiquitous now that I guess they couldn't even really conceive of where animation started. So I decided that they needed a hands-on experience with animation techniques to kind of get a little bit more of an appreciation for that. So I started them with like flip books and thaumatropes and praxinoscopes. I brought in a ton of animation toys just to kind of give them an idea of this is where it started. We had no computers. In the 1800s, it was just like optical toys. And they thought that was kind of cool. And then I had them make praxinoscope strips. Those aren't theirs. That's just that's what came with the praxinoscope when I bought it. But I had them make praxinoscope strips, and okay, I'm just going to run it. I want to remind you that these are not like students who come from an arts background. Arts are kind of a luxury, and most of these students were never really interested, some of them might not have been interested because they might not have thought that this was something that they could do, and they were not really exposed to arts classes. So, but yeah, these were the praxinoscope strips that they do, and they thought it was kind of cool, and it kind of gave an arts and crafts feeling to the class, which they thought was fun. Because again, I think they thought that they were just going to watch cartoons. And this was kind of successful. I'm showing you the more successful praxinoscope strips, but there was still a little bit that was missing in their understanding of kind of frame by frame. And we're also working with limited resources. We don't have an animation lab. We don't have animation cameras. We have no animation software. So I'm pretty much improvising as we go, hence super low-tech Praxinoscope strips. The next exercise that I wanted to have them do was stop motion. And initially I thought, great, everybody has a camera on their phone, let's do that. And there's free animation software available, so we can use Monkey Jam, which is free, and it's a line tester, and it costs nothing. And that was a little bit of a fail on my part because the students didn't know how to change the resolution settings on their cameras. So they were trying to import 4K images into Monkey Jam on computers that just couldn't handle them. And so that particular one was a bust. So I went to them and I said, like, okay, but we want to have them doing something a little bit more. And I found out that the library had just gotten a whole bunch of new iPads. And so this is my NFB plug. I can't help it. I used to work there, and then I found out that they had this NFB Stop-Mo app, which is awesome. It's simple to use. The library had just acquired a whole bunch of brand new iPads, which they weren't using, and I went and I said, can I steal like 20 of them for my class? And they told me that I could just take them, but I was responsible, so I was going to need some kind of collateral from the students to make sure we got them back. So at the beginning of every class, I would dole out the iPads, and the students would give me their car keys and their driver's licenses in order to get the iPad. We started with just a bunch of exercises. So I had them just play with it. I showed them how to use the app. It's really, really simple. I brought it, so if anybody wants to see how it works, it's super easy. And so initially, they were just doing tests. And I just kind of had them play in class. You can see they're just kind of fooling around and seeing what you can do with this. And the more tests that they did, the more sophisticated their animation got. So, initially they might have had stuff that was like moving too slowly or moving too quickly. And, eventually they started trying other things like panning backgrounds and just, they were getting a handle on what timing was and how it worked. And they also discovered, hopefully I'll manage to finish before it starts. But they discovered that the app has sound, so they could just import sound. They could use sound effects that were built into the app. They were just playing, and it was kind of making them excited about animation and what it was. And so finally, for their final projects, I gave them the choice of doing animated films or a little animated sequence for their final project, or a paper. And at the beginning of the semester, when I proposed this to them, everybody was going to do a paper. Oh, here, there's sound. So I lost my train of thought with the sound. Oh, yes, yeah. So I gave them the option of doing an animation paper or an animated project for the final projects. And at the beginning of the semester, I did a little survey. And I said, who's going to do a paper? And like almost everybody said they were going to do a paper because nobody could conceive of doing something animated. And by the end of the semester, when they finally turned in their final projects, I got one paper and everybody else did animation. So I have a couple of the films. And then the other thing, which we don't necessarily have to show, but it's just if we have time, the students decided to challenge me. So I didn't even talk about pixelation. No, that's their final films. Crap. Pause. Stop. Okay, we'll just watch their final films. Something's out of order because there was supposed to be pixelation exercises in here too. Apparently his film is based on reality. His apartment has tons of giant spiders in it for reals. Is that all the time we have? I can keep going. So just the last thing, and we don't have to show it, but the students were so excited about the class that on the last week of class they challenged me. And I don't know where the pixelation exercises are. I think somehow maybe it got lost in the PowerPoint. But I had made them do a pixelation exercise where I showed them Neighbors and I showed them Cherry Tale and I showed them parts of The Adventures of Tom Thumb, which was a British film from the 90s, which they were a little bit disturbed by. And so, yeah, they did pixelation exercises and they discovered that, you look kind of silly when you do them. So they challenged me to do the pixelation exercise, and that was like the skating thing. That was just a portion of it. And I had one day to do it in because basically they challenged me on the Monday and the last day of class was on the Wednesday. And yeah, I don't think they thought I was going to do it, but do you want to see it? Okay. Oh, that's our building being constructed in the back. That's it. Are we doing questions now or later? Okay. So I guess I'm done.
So next on our program, we have another former student of mine. Yay! I know. Yeah. Right. There you go. Go forth and preach the gospel of Sito-ishness. So. Anyway, and actually I'm just passing on Art Babbitt stuff. So Okay, so Kati Anguelov is a freelance motion graphics and animation artist and a former online marketing coordinator at Disney Studio, and is currently a full-time instructor at the Art Institute of California, Orange County. Kati.
My subject matter, my title that I chose was The Big Fish in the Small Pond. And this issue has been around in my 10 years of teaching consistently. So let me start with the beginning. So though we are all dealing with a really different type of education, all of us are coming from different type of schools, and our students are coming from extremely diverse population, I think the most common type of student that we all have is what we call the millennial. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this type of a student, but essentially they have lots of names. So Time magazine identified the millennial generation as people who were born between 1980 to 2000. And they earned lots of lovely nicknames such as Generation Y or Generation Me or Trophy Kids. And we can, debate whether it is, we can blame Dr. or Mr. Rogers, or is it because of the helicopter parenting style. However, they are around, and I'm going to read Wikipedia's description of the millennial generation. Jean Twenge, the author of the 2006 book Generation Me, attributes millennials with the traits of confidence and tolerance, but also identifies a sense of entitlement and narcissism based on personality surveys that showed increasing narcissism among millennials compared to preceding generations when they were tweens or in their 20s, end of quote. So this sense of entitlement and belief in their own specialness is a challenge to work with in the classroom. We can all agree with that. The type of student who refuses, for example, I just had this last week. I asked them to deliver a project in a certain format, and my special student says he can't do that because then the film will look ugly. He can't compress it because he wants to see it in its own glory, So I said, you will be a wonderful gem to work with. I'm really jealous of your future employer because you follow directions so well. Thank you. And he didn't notice that he did anything wrong. He was very much, right. So it will become, and it is becoming, a huge impediment, this type of attitude, when it comes to entering the creative field. And oftentimes, because their ego is flamed by the fact that they're in a small community and their work shines, they want to enter in a creative position. So they want that first entry-level job to be a creative job. And they choose. I have these students where they have several job offers and they're very choosy. They're really expecting the studio to create and craft a position specifically for them. And then finally they settle with one, and oftentimes they actually quit. Just recently I had a student who actually quit after a month because he didn't get to do anything. Like, he wasn't given anything creatively, there was no creative decision, he was just a work monkey, and he couldn't deal. So I've seen this several times already happening, and sometimes these type of students actually take up to a year to finally settle down. Whether it is because their ego is broken or Sally Mae is knocking and the student loans have to be paid back, I don't know. But I feel like we really need to address the issue of preparing these students, not only in the sense of technology and know-how and animation, but how to prepare them to have the right attitudes at the end of their education is the big question. So I tried to address the issue first in my classes where I first meet them. It's usually where they take motion graphics is about halfway their education. So they've been around the block a little bit. They really want to do this now because the ones that came as fanboys, which we're all familiar with, the type of kids who, just like you said, they love watching cartoons, they want to do animation, and then they realize, of course, how much work it is, So they're gone. Now I have the real hardcore people left, and it seems like they're kind of bored with that, big talk about the expectations of the industry, or how do you have to conduct yourself, or what I'm expecting in a classroom. You know, when you're turning in your project, even if you hate being here, you're supposed to pretend you like it. You're supposed to show it to me that you want to do this, because that's how I will respect you. And it kind of flies over their heads. They're sort of, either they heard it too often, you know, so many people told them, or their belief firm in their own specialness. I don't know what it is, but it just doesn't seem to work. So lately, the other approach that I have taken is that I invited industry professionals into my classrooms and let them tell them how it is. And that seems to stick, but I still have the wandering ones that, you know, they talk to the industry guys, they show their work, they take the critique, and yet I don't see a real change. So I really wanted this forum to I wanted to sparkle a conversation in this forum about what kind of strategies could we come up with to sort of work with this type of attitude. And I'd love to hear anybody's feedback and input.
And that is that you say, okay, we're learning a head turn. Here are the basics, here's the timing. I want you to do it very basically, but then.
Did you all hear that? No, okay. So let's say you give the assignment of a head turn, and you say, here's the timing, and here's a very simple model. And I want you to learn this, but what I want you to take from this is I want you to run with it. And they can't run. They want to know exactly how many frames. They want to take a picture of the board, and they want to feed back to you exactly what you gave them. And I find this inability to run with it. And I can't understand where that comes from, except I think they are used to being given, here is this, regurgitate it to me perfectly, and then you get the star. And so this is a struggle I'm having. And so what I say is, here's assignment A. Now your assignment is to take it and apply it to B.
Yes, and I struggle with it a lot. Also tutorials of, you know, the tutorials that they can watch on whatever, Video Copilot, any type of site, because they tell them exactly specifically 1, 2, 3, following the steps, and the outcome will look glorious. And again, yes, you need to think, yes, exactly, and over and over. There's nothing out. There's some do, yeah.
I think a lot of that is because through a lot of schooling, through their primary education, the idea of experimentation and getting things wrong is drilled out of students. So the idea of that they could fail and still succeed, that it's okay to fail on something, is totally foreign. And in a lot of times, because of the schedules for schools and the fact that, you know, they don't have a lot of time to complete their work, they still, even when they come to college, still get that same, there's no time to fail, there's no time to get your work wrong and then correct it. So there's no experimentation. They want to know exactly what you want, exactly how you know, how it should be turned in. And it's hard to get them to loosen up enough so that they do experiment. But I feel that one of the things I find is that in the introductory class, I specifically have an instructor who's very, very, very experimental. And she makes them experiment and honestly really doesn't, you know, have them care too much about a grade. And they seem to loosen up a little bit because I was lucky enough to find someone who's, you know, not in that rigid idea. So I just...
Also, when people, is this on? Okay, yeah. When people speak, also introduce yourself and what school you're from, because it's kind of nice to hear where everybody's from. But it's interesting to your point. I remember something Jules Engel used to say at Cal Arts when he'd say, I want people. He says, I want you to fail. I want people to fail because it's through failure that you learn the parameters. You learn the boundaries to what you're trying to develop. You know, is to go out there and try something, and if it fails, then you'll know better for the next time. So, which is kind of a neat concept. You know, run jump.
Hi, I'm Danielle. I've taught for 10 years at Video Symphony, which is unfortunately no more. It's a trade school for motion graphics. And I've kind of moved around some of the other schools as well. What I found helped me, because I also have a really diverse student population, that I was dealing with people who had never touched a computer in their life, and then other kids who had been living and breathing tutorials for all of their high school years and didn't really know how to be people. So two things really helped me to kind of deal with first with the drowning students who couldn't handle the computers, and then with the other people who were extremely needy on the me specialness side, was giving them hard deadlines was really important, because a lot of times in education, they're not given a real deadline, or they're given a deadline, but it's like, it's okay if you don't make that deadline. It's not okay if you don't make the deadline. We were in a pass-fail situation, so you failed if you didn't do it. And a lot of students really objected and got upset, but in the end, they would always come back and say, I'm so glad you taught me that, because now I'm in the real world and I actually can make a deadline, and that was really helpful. But then also balancing it within the classroom, I found bringing in the industry professionals did help, but also, I mean, because I work freelance as well, I was able to tell a couple of war stories that also would impress them, and we would do a role play thing where I would come in as a client and act like one of my many clients over the years, and not act like I had no idea what they were talking about when they would ask me questions in a way that a client cannot conceive of, and just try and get them to understand. When you're steeped in this stuff in an educational environment, you get very comfortable with like the terminology and what you think you know, and then when you get outside, it's like not everybody knows what you know, and yes, you were special at school, nobody cares anymore. And so it was an interesting, that really helped me. So I just wanted to share the role playing was super helpful. So.
Because we've just been given word our pizza is on its way. So, but please hold your thoughts, because after lunch we're gonna have a full hour of discussing all these ideas. Thank you, Kati.
Okay, next up, we're going to have Mr. Van Partible, and yay! And Van is faculty here at LMU, but he's more widely known as the creator of Johnny Bravo, and which was a producer and development person, and all-around cool guy. So go ahead, man.
Makes me talk louder. That's very cool. I'm sorry. So at different times, I'm going to cough for you, just for you, because I've got that thing in my throat. Anyways, just to give you a little bit more background, again, my name is Van Partible. I was brought up in Salinas, California, the lettuce capital of the world. Everyone knows that. Actually, they just sent this thing out, because I read the Facebook, and Salinas, California is the #2 most uneducated city in the U.S., which is pretty exciting. Go Salinas. That's pretty bad. But I went here to Loyola Marymount University, where I was an animation major, where before they had an animation major. I think I was a studio arts major with an animation emphasis. But I created Johnny Bravo here and sold it to Hanna-Barbera right after, so it was pretty much my senior thesis. And when they needed teachers here, they asked me 2 years after I graduated to teach here. So I've been teaching for like 20 years. So I've seen the students come and go, and I didn't know how to teach. It was horrible, because I had two semesters as a TA, so I was pretty much taking over Dan McLaughlin's course and learning how to do that. But Dan McLaughlin, I don't know if anyone knows him, but he's a really good teacher. He actually took over Chuck Jones' class over in Pasadena because Chuck Jones couldn't teach, and it was a very hard thing. So I learned how to do that. But I've worked at Disney TV Animation, Cartoon Network, Hanna-Barbera, Film Roman, and currently I am developing a pilot over at Cartoon Network. So I was trying to say all that in 30 seconds because that's kind of what my talk is about in terms of character development and character study and because right now I teach character design. I've been teaching it now for like about 3 semesters. I've taught all the different types of animation. But character design was something that I was kind of afraid of, I guess, because everybody draws differently. And I went to all the different character design teachers that I know. I mean, the only ones that I know are pretty much CalArts people. So everyone that taught character design at CalArts, I'm like, how do you do it? What are your assignments? What do you do? And one of them even went so far as to say, you know you can't teach character design because it's just horrible and difficult, and the students don't know what they're doing. And you try and tell them one thing, and it's crazy. But the guest speaker thing, every semester I bring in guest speakers. Tom Sito knows about guest speakers. He likes to, that's one of the little things that he said about guest speakers.
I actually learned that from Harvey Kurtzman, because when I went to the School of Visual Arts in New York, and I was one of Harvey Kurtzman's student assistants, and he always liked to go for a beer before he took the last train home to Mount Vernon. And so we would sit around talking, and I think he kind of sensed that I was going to teach someday, because he told me, he goes, my theory of teaching is, don't tell them everything you know the first class. Second, you have a 15-week course, bring in 5 guest speakers. Because pros love to talk, students never get enough of hearing from pros, and you can sit in the back and have a cigarette.
See, I do all those things except the cigarette. So I usually bring guest speakers in my class. The one main guest speaker that I always like to bring in is this guy named Dan Haskett. He's the guy that designed Little Mermaid, and he's done all kinds of other crazy things, like figuring out how to animate The Simpsons, to animate Batman animated series, all those different things. So after he does his like drawing stuff for the students, and they get all weirded out, I pretty much tell them, I go, just so you know, all of you guys who want to be character designers, this is your competition. So you kind of scare them a little bit. I like doing that. And so, but if you know Dan, he's a very cerebral artist. So he really thinks about what he's doing, thinks about what he's drawing. And so the question that always comes up is, what do you look at for inspiration before you start designing a character? And the thing that he always answers is life. Like, usually the kids are all, what? It's like, what? No, you're supposed to tell me what I'm supposed to look at so I can copy that and put that up here, and I just want to learn how to draw better. And I'm like, it's a character design class, so you kind of need to already know how to draw. In my class, I don't like to draw for the first, I think, 6 classes. I know that sounds weird and counterintuitive. I'm working on it, but I think parts of it are working, because I get the things back from the students. And they always, I mean, everyone likes my class except for the fact they're all, what could be done better? They're all, we could draw more. Okay, I guess they're going to draw more in the next bunch of semesters. But when Dan first gave this answer to my class, it got me thinking. You can't just tell kids to let life be their inspiration without giving them the proper lens to look through. Otherwise, they're just copying trends, and their knowledge is limited to pretty much what they can Google. So, personally, I like being a hands-on kind of artist. So the old adage, write what you know, I like applying it to draw what you know. So it makes sense that if you want to create fully dimensional characters, that you kind of need to know yourself as a character. I like to start there, rather than having them figure out who this person is as a character and stuff like that. You can Google all that stuff. But I do a lot of self-reflection with the students and have them figure out their story. Because everything begins with story. Whenever you watch TV, I mean, I guess a good example of that is reality TV. Like, take, for example, The Voice. Anyone watch The Voice? I watch The Voice. I like The Voice. Thank you, Aubry, the only voice watcher here. But before they do any of the, before they bring them out to do their thing, they put together this pre-produced package, and they tell their story. And they brand each contestant to see who they are. So they have them go through and they tell some sort of trial that they went through, or some sort of thing that they can hook onto, like, oh, it's a stay-at-home mom, and she's had this music career, or she's been wanting to have this music career, or all those different little things that make themselves unique. The strategy I use to help the students with their journey as a character development artist, it starts with each student formulating their 30-second story. If you're wondering what the 30-second story is, it's kind of like an elevator pitch. Everyone knows what an elevator pitch is. I'm guessing elevator pitch. It's the theory. The elevator pitch is you get into an elevator and you're like, oh, I only have a couple of seconds to tell this person what I want to tell them, and it's usually about 30 seconds. That's a pretty big building, isn't it, for 30 seconds? 30 seconds it feels like a long time, but it's not really a long time. But it does two different things. This is, for my class, the first thing is it helps them figure out who they are in terms of their first interview. Because usually when you go into an interview, the first thing they usually ask is, tell me about yourself. And it can either go horribly awry or it cannot. I'm usually, when I ask that question for the prospective employee, I'm trying to get a grasp of who they are and what they can do. I use the barometer of would I go camping with this person, or would I want to sit next to this person on an airplane? Things like that. But what I want to make sure that they do is that they start talking and they formulate the story, their little pre-packaged thing that you get from the reality show, so that they can, so that I can make a decision or the other person can make a decision, and you're presenting your best self. Because if you have no no roadmap to go anywhere, you pretty much start rambling on, or you pretty much say the stuff that you just put in your resume, and it's really boring. Usually I have like 15 kids in my class, and they all have to go around and say their 30-second story, and then after they say the 30-second story, we each critique them. It's like we tell them, what did you like about it, what did you not like about it, what can you move around, so that it's engaging. And by the end, the only thing you can think of is, it's like, I only get to hire one of you. Do I even want to hire any of you? So you really want to get them thinking about, there's something really important about that. And if you can begin figuring out who you are, you can apply that to character design. Because the thing that I want to do is make sure that the students are asking themselves questions to formulate their stories. Like, for my purposes, I want to make sure that their story tells about their background. Where are you from? Who are your people? What brought you here to Hollywood? I don't know if you recognize in my 30-second story, it's like, I tell you where I'm from, gives you something to think about, something to talk about. It puts you in a place. It kind of brands you, I guess you can say. Everyone knows about brands. I had to take I didn't know much about brands at all when I got into animation, but as I've been in the producer part, you realize when you get into the marketing of the show, and when you get into all the different aspects of everything, you have to have a good brand. When you are a employee, when you're a storyboard artist, all those things, it's all branding. So if you can't, you need to figure out who are you going to be when you go out there. It's like, I want to do storyboarding. That's great, then you need to be the best storyboard artist, and that's your brand. So when I'm looking for someone, I'm like, it's like, I guess the best analogy that I heard is if you were a coach and you were trying to put together a baseball team. It's like, I need a really good first baseman. And then someone comes in and said, I can play all the positions. And you're like, and that's what a lot of the students do. Oh, I'm good at this, I'm good at that, I'm so great. I'm like, you know what, you need to be a good first baseman. It's like, what do you need, who are you, what are you trying to figure out? So that's one of the main things that I want to make sure that they get across in the story. It's like, when your background draws you to this specific area of animation that you feel like you're really good at. Ideally, it also suggests that you would be good at any particular genre, like action-adventure or comedy, or you're, like I was saying, the aspect of you're good at storyboarding, you're good at character design. And then why do you do it? One of the things that I learned about in Hollywood is that people really want hard workers. You know, they don't want the person who got into animation because they thought it was easy. They thought, that sounded like fun. They got into college and they got accepted to the school. And I was doing pre-law, and all the people in animation, they were just having a great old time. And that's what I wanted to do. And they're not looking for those people. So try and find something in your story that's kind of uniquely positioned, that this is something that I've always wanted to do. This is something that I grew up wanting to do. I've watched cartoons all my life. I'll just try and figure out what that thing is in your story. Those are some of the things that I want to make sure that they put within that 30 seconds, because it's really important for them to get to figure out, okay, this is the person. After that 30 seconds, they're going to brand you. They're going to say, oh, that's the one girl who grew up watching Disney cartoons, or that's the girl who loves Legend of Korra, blah, 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 blah. So basically, you're trying to get to all the good things, kind of like the Princess Bride, the good parts. But for the purpose of my class, it also starts them on the road to creating fully realized and dimensional characters. So from there, they try and figure out their story. And you're like, sometimes it's not very exciting, sometimes it is, because they kind of know themselves. I'm not in the therapy job, although my wife has her master's in psychology. I try and make sure, okay, there's not really much to go by. So one of the assignments that I have them do is to write a list of 100 things that they're most proud of. Because that gets them thinking about, okay, there's things that I believe, things that I think are interesting. I mean, I tell them to write down 100 things instead of like 10 or 20, because that gets past all the superficial stuff like, oh, I love the color of my hair, and oh, I know how to count to 50 backwards. But by the time you get to like 80 or 90, you're like, oh, I've been proud of all these different things. That they reach back into grade school. I was the student of the month in 3rd grade. I've got to read really interesting things, like I kept my sanity through a difficult childhood, or I got my bulimia under control, or I haven't gotten pregnant. Things like that you're like, okay, now you're getting to the root of more things that are interesting about you, things that you're proud of, things that you are, that make you who you are. And it starts them off on a tool to start analyzing themselves, which in turn they can use to start analyzing their characters in terms of a little roadmap there. And then from there, we figure out what are your 100 media influences. So what do you like doing? Or what are your favorite movies? What are your favorite TV shows when you're growing up? And so again, you do 100 of those, because then you can start whittling down what genre are you? It's like, are you the action-adventure type person? Are you the comedy person? Do you even really like animation? Because everything that influences you is nothing to do with animation. So then from there, one of the assignments, the main thing that I want to do is get the students thinking about character, thinking about anything but drawing. Because when you go back to what Dan Haskell was talking about, he looks at inspiration as for inspiration, he looks at life. And so I want them to start thinking before they do anything, before they put pencil to paper, like, who is this character that I'm designing? I've developed a character. What do they look like? I don't know what they look like. If you start with the drawing, then you'll pretty much draw the same old anime character that you draw, the same old funny cartoon character that you consistently draw. Then you put characteristics on that character. It's like, figure out your characteristics first, and then start whittling into what design and shape and character that you want. Because I've been through a lot of student film festivals, and there's some really pretty animation out there, and it's just amazing what students are doing nowadays. But I don't really feel for the characters so much. And so that's one of the reasons why I do this, to make sure that the students come up with something that's really interesting, something that is engaging, and it all starts with figuring themselves out. So I went off my notes. I don't think I even used all my notes. There's a lot more to talk about.
We'll have the full hour after too. We can expand on it then, for sure. Thanks, man. Amazing. So we have one more speaker.
There we go.
Lost her. I
All
think
right.
we've lost her.
Did you get Alan? No.
Apparently we've lost her. We're doing an experiment on this one where she's making a call in from Canada. This is 3 Canadians on this panel. That's like half. It's like
My
half.
goodness. Yeah.
Or, get 4, and then we have. See?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, 2.
Huh?
2.
So when you say mouse, do you also pronounce it like hose?
Mouse?
Mouse?
Did I just say? I mean, I don't know. Mouse?
Mouse of mouse?
I'm trying. Mouse?
Mouse.
Is that?
Yeah.
Am I saying house?
Yeah.
So we've lost Ellen on the phone.
Remember in the 1960s they would say, and now through the wonder of satellite communications, like, we'll have contact with Toronto, Ontario, although we don't have her right now. So
It's true.
Oh well.
Well, the experiment has failed, I guess. Are we trying to get her back? Yes, we are trying to get her back.
Okay.
So this is going to be a little odd because we can hear Ellen, but she cannot hear us nor see us. So she's going into this blind. Imagine lecturing your students with your back to them. That's what it will be like.
Yeah.
Which I actually did the other day because we were talking about good posing, and if you don't see the character, you might lose your audience. So I actually started talking with my back to them.
Mm-hmm.
There's my antidote.
Yeah. I know it's interesting what Van was saying. I'd like to, maybe for the discussion later, but I always think it's interesting when you're talking about students who want, maybe want to do one thing or they're better at another thing or something. There's a lot of examples.
Hey,
there's
Ellen.
Ellen. She's here. Hey. All right.
I can't hear you. So if things become a little wonky, please bear with me. I have no idea what I'm doing up here. My name is Ellen Besen. I didn't hear my intro, so I'm going to fill in a few more details just in case. I worked in animation for many years, worked at the National Film Board for years as an animation director, taught at Sheridan College for many years, and increasingly over the years I became more and more interested in animation storytelling as my specialty. And when I say storytelling, I mean starting with concept right through to script and right to the very end of all the different ways that we actually communicate through animation. It's become really almost an obsession. I find it incredibly interesting. These days I mostly write about animation, I mentor people one-on-one, etc. So I haven't been in the classroom that often, although I miss that. But I'm still very much in touch with students through a variety of means. So what I wanted to talk about today is generic thinking, which ties in actually to much of what everybody has talked about today, but talking about it in the most general sense, because it can affect lack of diversity, it can affect lack of individualization and characterization, it can affect people just copying. In fact, it's all about copying. I want to make a clear distinction that this is not about the use of generic material. It is about the attitude one brings to the use of material. And what happens frequently, and again, this is something I found, it's not just this generation, it's every generation. I think it is basically a problem of beginners who've never had to really think about what the nature of a story is, or how things are communicated, they're not thinking the details. And so what they will do is automatically draw from whatever resource they have. 20 years ago, the students came in with a narrow band of information because the world was a smaller place. Often they were coming in from small towns at the school I was teaching, and they simply had been exposed to very little. So what they put up onto the page, what they came up with their ideas was based on that narrow window. Different problem right now with kids who are in school right now, but it still comes down to the same thing. They've never been challenged. They've never had to really think. It actually comes down more to that they end up going to automatic places, drawing from films they've seen, accepting something as the way things are done without considering whether it's appropriate to the work they're doing. So it's primarily a lack of awareness. Of course, what's interesting in animation is that the use of generic material is extremely important. We find it, it's a shorthand way to get to an information quickly. It's an excellent point for satire because you can count on the audience knowing exactly what's going on with very little explanation. There's tons and tons of ways in which we have to use generic material. But of course, the whole key is that we have to use it with complete knowledge of the context. We have to be aware that we are deciding to use generic material because it's most appropriate for the situation we're dealing with. A good example would be something, often some of the biggest areas people make the mistake is that they end up, because of generic thinking, their ideas are too general, they're too broad. Other times they're not specific, they're too specific. So a good example of an idea that's too broad would be, I've had many students over here who want to do something about the evil person who wants to take over the world. And because that's as far as I got in my thinking, there was no purpose to there was no particular reason why this character wants to take over the world, what their specific vehicle will be, etc. And the solution to that, to go back and find 3 great monstrous personalities from real life, and tell me the difference between Attila the Hun and Hitler. They're not the same people. They're not Stalin or whoever you put in there. They're not driven by the same stories, and it's that story that will give you the specific problem they're trying to solve by taking over the world, and therefore how they will do it. On the other hand, you have Pinky and the Brain, which of course knowingly played on that tendency to want to make things that rule the world, and gave you a character who, in a very hilarious way, wanted to do that without any other explanation. He was the embodiment of that kind of thinking, and they played it off perfectly. On the other side, it's in the other one that I particularly want to share an exercise with you, which is the one where what's happened is that a character's become too specific. They've locked in on an idea of a character, of a certain kind of character can only be handled one way, and this will be regardless of context, of any other circumstances they're dealing with. This one I found and developed into an exercise which challenges the students' thinking in a way that surprises them and is fun and involves no shame, and kind of it's designed as a brain shot to kind of snap you into awareness of what you've been doing without realizing it. What happened was that over the years of many years of teaching, I began to notice that in amongst all the various kinds of generalized generic elements going on, year in, year out, regardless of what story they're telling, what era it was set in, the nature of the story, what the other characters were, if my students were putting an older woman, like an old lady character, it was always the same old lady. You're in, you're out, and after a couple of years of this, I decided to see if I could build something out of this. So I had them all, I put them into a room where they just had chairs and me at the top, and told them to bring a sketchbook. And I asked them to, without looking at each other's work, to please just take a couple of minutes and do a quick sketch of an old lady. And then when they finished drawing, again, I asked them again, without looking at each other's work, everybody, whose character has white hair put up in a bun? And most of the hands go up. And whose character has little tiny, tiny wire rim glasses? All the hands go up. Whose has a cane? Who has a dress that's down to mid-shin or down to the floor? And on it went. And of course, they were surprised to find that they were all drawing the same character. And now my visuals are a little crude today, but did they go away? Pardon me a second here. No, there they are. What they were actually drawing was Whistler's mother, or even more pointedly, they were drawing the old lady from the Warner Brothers cartoon. Now, I have actually seen the Warner Brothers cartoon, but then now shifting into, I'm starting to see her used in ads in various places again where it doesn't fit into anything. So then my next question is, well, who is she? Is she your grandmother? Of course not. Is she your great-grandmother? Probably not. Is she any old woman you have seen? And of course, it became the perfect example of them having picked out one very clearly drawn stereotype that was so kind of burned into their brains that even if they were telling a completely contemporary story and all the other characters were appropriately dressed and coiffed and all those things, this is the old lady that they would stick into the middle of it and not realize that she had no place there unless she was, being there as some husband. some other special function. So the beauty of this was, first place, everybody would laugh when they realized what they had done. And from there, it opened up a fantastic conversation of, first identifying that she is the model of an old woman from at least 100 years ago. That she has no immediate reference to her immediate life. I could then ask them, okay, tell me about, the old, women in your life, your aunt, if you have great aunts, if you have a grandmother, what do they look like? I could send them off to the mall or some other part of the city, say, go find and sketch and look and come back with real versions. And even redo the same exercise a second time in the classroom, just having them, letting them think about it a little bit more, and they would come out with a much more diverse and very, much more interesting range of characters, of whom the stereotype still has her place, but she's not the one and only. What I liked about this as an exercise was, as I say, it was fun, and because it opens the door then to considering the whole range of what goes on with generic thinking. To be aware, are you simply drawing from a pot of information that's been handed to you and it hasn't occurred, you say, this is the way things are always done, therefore this is how I will do them. So, a stereotype can get reinforced that way over and over again. Am I not being aware when I'm seeing a character that I like? In fact, they aren't just the dictator who wants to rule the world. They are, the great ones always have special qualities, special issues around that then produces more of a story. So the more you use it, the more that you get into all the different ranges of where the generic thinking comes in and start to identify it in specific ways and start to encourage your students to open up the doorway, open up in their own minds of what they think can be put down and what they think is going to read on the screen, and it gives them room to play around. It's interesting, even in the occasional time, usually with animation students, this exercise works beautifully every time. Why? I still don't really know why, but it's a surprising phenomenon. But even when I've occasionally done the exercise with a group that is a little bit more varied in their background, and so they aren't all exactly, it really seems to be an animated problem. What happens is that, I can take this out because I'm not blind for a while, here I am, that you can still have this, you can still talk about what's happening in the situation, you can still point out, because that old lady is such a highly built-in icon that we have, she's still a very good starting place for challenging the thinking. And so I hope that's something that you find interesting. I can't take questions, unfortunately, but I will be available afterwards as part of the general discussion. So if anyone would like to talk with us further, I would be delighted to talk to you. Thanks very much, everybody.
Hey, thanks to all the speakers. That was fantastic. I guess I'm thanking myself. And thanks, Tom, for moderating. And I hope you're all hungry. Well, let's just jump right into talking. I know all of you guys must have many things you want to talk about, and it's not often as educators we get together and discuss what it's like in the classroom with each other. So, we can. Oh, yes. Should we wrap with that? Okay. Just don't leave until Dory talks, because you are going to want to hear what Dory says. This is the carrot and the stick here. We will all be graded. Okay, so so you can respond to anything that the presenters discussed today, or if you had another thought, and why don't we just kick off some conversation? Yes, good. Start.
Stand up and be seen. Standing up, okay. I'm Danielle. I have taught at trade school, I've taught at UCLA, I've taught at LMU, so I'm kind of doing the academic gypsy right now. And looking for home eventually, but right now I'm all over the place. And I was curious about, for everybody, this kind of torches and pitchforks against brick and mortar schools that I'm encountering online. There are a lot of online schools that are popping up, and there are a lot of famous in their own field, illustrators, animators, character designers, what have you, that are out there saying, you don't need an education from a school, they're just going to take hundreds of thousands of dollars and give you nothing. And I'm trying to figure out how to combat that with my own students and how to I am actually taking a class as kind of a mole to see what's going on and like trying to do my research and see what's going on. And it's interesting because I do think one of the strengths that we have is community. So I think that Jose was right on with the 220 class here at LMU. And there are some other things that I have thoughts on, but I wanted to hear everybody else's thoughts and sort of like, if you've encountered this, what you say to students, what you think about this movement, how you are planning to ward off the fire and the pitchforks when they come for you. Okay, thank you. Anybody want to talk?
Hi, my name is Lee Crow, and I worked in the industry for a long time, and I've been teaching for 10 years, and I work at the Art Institute and also CSUN, Cal State Northridge. So the problem that I've encountered has to do with accreditation. And it seems, and I have worked more in Georgia than I have here, but it seems to me that the accreditation boards don't quite understand that the people with a lot of industry experience have just as much to offer as the people who have just gone to school and gotten their master's and then started teaching without ever actually working in the industry. So that's something that we run into at the brick and mortar schools, I think. So I do hear about people going to, or taking classes at, oh, what is the one? Now I can't remember. Oh, Animation Mentor. And coming out of there and saying, I learned more there than I did in college. You know, and it's like, well, that's because it's not accredited and you've got industry people teaching you. So that's the reason for it. I don't know how we get around that, but I think that's the primary problem.
So I think that the problem is the understanding of what you get at a trade school, whether it's an accredited trade school or a brick and mortar trade school or an online trade school, and what you get at a university or a college. And the truth is, and most of us know this truth because many of us got our first jobs without a college degree, or at least without them asking if we had a college degree, that it's your portfolio that counts when you get out there. And I don't think there's any point in being disingenuous to the students and saying, you know, the first place that hires you is going to ask if you have a college degree, because all you have to do is go look at the job listings online. And lately I've actually started seeing some requests for undergraduate degrees, but it's been very recent. Most of the time they want industry experience, and that's what they want. And it remains to be about the portfolio. But my selling point to my students and to the parents of my students is that you can get that first cubicle job out of a trade school, and you can spend the rest of your life in the cubicle, provided they never start a new software, they never develop a new kind of animation that you didn't learn, provided nothing changes, which we can't guarantee. We can guarantee something will change. We're trying to raise storytellers, and storytellers have to have an all-around education. Just like Van points out, if you can't tell your own story, if you aren't willing to dig down into the depths of the characters and the stories, and you don't have a vocabulary that's rich culturally, you aren't going to be a good storyteller. And what you want to build is a long-term career in the business, and everything you do in the business is in service to the story. So what we offer in a university is, one, an environment where you can learn a lot of different things. I think LMU is another good example of this with their social justice direction. And second, you have a group of peers around you in which to learn to collaborate and to critique you and to build something. There are some online schools that do that well, and I have to say I think Animation Mentor does a really good job. There are a lot of online schools who don't do that well at all, where you're essentially in a room by yourself trying to learn and not getting enough critique to build your skills. So I think that a statement of truth to the people who are talking to us about the real value of an education in a community of artists is going to sell us bigger than trying to talk about accreditation and, you know, whatever. They don't understand that. They want a job in animation, and you have to put it in a way that tells them, well, okay, but you want a job in animation 20 years from now too, right? So I think that's the way you sell it.
Yeah, that's what I was actually going to say, was that it does cost money to go to the online schools, and because they're not regulated in any way, there are good ones, like Animation Mentor is a good one, and there are bad ones. And I tell my students that, you can take classes here, you can go online and take classes there. Just realize that here, everyone who's been teaching you has been vetted, so that they have a minimum kind of qualification to teach you. That's not the case everywhere. And that here you're getting a sense of community. You're meeting peers. You're going to make relationships that might last a long time and might get you your first job. And you don't get any of that online, So, but like you say, we have to face it. We live in an era where kids get everything online. So it's not like they're not going to go online. And I encourage them to go online and learn, but, take everything with a grain of salt.
Hi, I'm Raul Garcia, and basically I'm another animation gypsy. So I teach and work all over the world, and in the last years I have a specific teaching Spanish in all Latin America and Spain. One of the things I want to throw here to discussion is how can we stop the glamorization of technology in teaching animation? Because the problem I face is like I'm not teaching a specific software. I'm teaching general concepts and things that they apply to that software or any other software, but basically is the most basic thing that an animator need to know to be an animator and know a mover. And I always found that the students are more interested in the technology and the latest program and how to do Maya or Modo or whatever, than actually to learn, what it takes to have a good squash stretch and how can you put weight in the characters. So is any magic recipe that we can apply so students can approach the way we teach with less stigmas about, ooh, it's 2D, ooh, it's just, drawing, not pushing buttons.
We were just having that conversation, actually. Not hot.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi. Switch. Change. No, we were just having that conversation upstairs. The, this idea that when they come to us into our classroom, they have ideals about where they want to go or, what type of animation they want to do. But I find that once they learn the traditional, which we teach and LMU teaches, I think most places here probably start some traditional. Once they learn it, it's like they've all of a sudden discover, there's a wonderful world. And I find the opposite. I find that once they learn it, students have a tough time leaving traditional and to, want to learn Maya or new programs. I don't know how you guys feel.
I just wanted to say, so I'm one of those teachers that had to really step it up and just been thrown into teaching, and I had to learn a lot of technology as it went along. And yes, my students come into my class and they're like, okay, are we going to learn cinema? We took the class because we want to learn cinema. Are we going to learn After Effects? So what I'm trying to do with my classes is actually give them assignments that require thinking. So we go through a specific idea, a technical idea, so to speak, and then we look at a bunch of examples where you apply that technology towards expressing your thoughts. And it's very challenging. A lot of them really get just frozen up, unless I really step by step say, okay, so you're going to take this thing and you're going to use this technology because it expresses something about your thought process. But for the most part, I think it's possible. She's back. Hi. Can you hear us?
Nope.
Would have been great.
Just to add to that, also, how do you guys approach it when the administration comes to you and says, we know you want to teach these traditional things, but we really need you to teach ZBrush or something like that? Like, do you have good...
Yes, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I've been teaching whatever they ask
Yes.
me to, but yeah, it's like, how do you deal with that?
I've also been making my students learn traditional like this semester, and I find that
and they're still resistant to it. They're like, we don't want to do this paper crap. But the way I explained it to them was, you need to learn paper. You need to learn the traditional techniques, because if I just throw you right into the software, you're going to cheat. And they were like, what? And I'm like, you're going to find out how to put a keyframe here and a keyframe there, and then you're just going to let the computer fill in the blanks. And you're going to be thrilled because it's moving, but you're not going to be thinking about how it's moving and why it's moving that way. If I make you do it on paper, you are being forced to consider every single position that you're placing, whatever, like you're bouncing ball, every single one of those positions, you're thinking about where you're placing it, you're thinking why you're placing it there. Whereas, so I showed you how to do it in Flash. Okay, you can like squish it in Flash and you can move it in Flash, but they'll just be happy that, the keyframes are doing the work for them. I said, and you know what that's going to give you? You're going to get something that moves, but it's going to be crappy animation.
I'm going to do another sports analogy. I don't even watch sports. I don't even know why. But it's like a basketball player. They don't go, can I get the best shoes? Because I want to play basketball better. They learn the basics. They learn how to dribble. They dribble 10,000 times. Try and figure out how they can do that the best. It's like you're teaching them the basics so that they can do everything to the best of their ability. And then they get the tools to do what they do, basically. I know folks like Gendy over at, when he was doing Hotel Transylvania 2, he had to reteach a lot of the people how to do basic animation so that it could look a certain way. I was working with a company, that 6 Point Harness, and we were doing some animation over there, and it was looking too like smooth and weird and stuff like that. And I'm like, can you do it on 2s? They're like, what? And it smoothed it out. It made it look cartoony. It made it look fun. But it's like, you don't have to do everything on 1s. It doesn't have to have that smooth, weird flow to it. But you don't know these things unless you know the basic principles of what animation is. So.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I in the program, there's 2 degrees where I teach. I'm Jeff from the College of the Canyons, by the way. Hi. So I didn't introduce myself, but I have a traditional drawn animation program and then a computer animation degree program. But my computer animators must take drawn intro, the introduction to animation, which is a drawn class before they can take the computer animation. But my point, I guess, is that even on the computer, I really stress the fundamentals, the principles, because yes, the computer can set keyframes for you and this is how you do it, but you still have to understand what's a good slow in, slow out. What's a good squash and stretch? Why do you do it? The basics still have to be taught, and it's not just teaching software, press a button, that makes it go. So no matter whether they're learning computered or drawn, they're still learning and being taught the same fundamental principles that they'll hopefully use no matter what medium they go into. So I'd say even, if you have to teach the through technology, use that technology to teach the fundamentals, if you can.
Ellen here.
Hi, Ellen.
Hi. I'm on the phone, so I'm invisible. Don't forget also the power of getting a guest speaker in. If you are yourself not familiar with this and don't have that, be able to point to the list of credits, if you can find someone who will come in who's actually done the work, who's been in the studio, especially someone who's currently there, that the power for the students, they can take that more seriously.
Excellent point. Excellent point. And we can hear you and we can see you, just so you know.
How's this? Is that better?
It's perfect. We can hear you. And we can see you. I don't think she can hear us. Booth, I don't think she can hear us. I can hear you, and I can see you. See, you, here, you. Can you communicate to her? Oh, she can. She says she can't hear me. Oh, oh, you can now. Hi.
I can reach you on WebEx with the sound off. Does that make sense?
No, we can. We totally heard everything you said, and we can also see you.
Yeah, but let's just, you can see me. Let's even better.
It's funny. Oh, there you are. There you are. Okay.
Okay, good. All right. Okay, so I've
Perfect.
got the sound off, and this works. So we're good set up now?
This is great. This is great.
Okay, so I can just, so when I want to answer, I can just say hi, it's Ellen.
Absolutely. Just jump right in. Okay, Kim, you had a comment?
Yeah. Oh, this is on. Good. Okay, so my latest rant, because I really stress cafe sketching and drawing skills and, throwing perspective into everything that I can. And I'm trying so hard, and they're getting it, and they draw properly when it comes to that sort of thing. And then you say, okay, bring it to finish, and then they jump into Photoshop. And I'm going to start a society against the misuse of Photoshop. I can't take it anymore. I know we teach them traditional painting skills at our university, and it's like they forget all of it, and then they start to coloring book and bad 80s airbrush shade. Everything. Does anyone have a solution to this? Dying.
Oh, yeah, well, a lot of things, right? Starting with what Dory said, which I came from the industry, and I'm still active doing my thing. So I think that there's also this general misconception that if you work at the university, it's because you have nowhere else to go, and you ended up doing classes. And in cases like, I know a lot of cases, we actually love the value of the education and what education means. And I'm going to be a little bit more political overall into the the common good of society. So I think that a couple of things that I'm really interested in sharing with you is that one tapping on my critical thinking presentation is that how that integrates into this the central characteristics of the future in society, in humankind, right? And basically there are like two major theories of the two forces that are driving modern society, and one is accelerated change, and the other is increasing complexity, right? So that is like, historians are talking about economic, it's talking about quantum physics, it's talking about. So basically the idea of perpetually moving behind software, a way of setting up education standards is just completely ludicrous because we're always catching up, right? The thing about critical thinking, the theory of critical thinking, and which is really important because modern science, especially quantum physics, are very much exploring how creative thinking of the artist can integrate into scientific methods, right? But we are not doing the other way around, right? We are not using methods of science to be applicable into our creative component and process because we think that it's something that it shouldn't be. We are artists, so we don't have to actually deal with these theories. And I think that's why critical thinking is so important, because what the value of education at a university like this one, going back to your question, is that we're not like creating these silos of individuals that do not connect and they're doing part of a process, right? What we're doing and what the Romans call is genius loci, which is the spirit of the place, right? So that is the formation of community. That's why being not perpetuators of an economic system is not exclusively what we're doing. We should be challenging reality, right? Because we are not absent. So what is it that we're doing when we're throwing all this, hundreds of graduates into the industry? Is that probably there's like this this quote that probably this new millennium generation, what they're going to find out is that they will have probably 7 or 8 career changes during their lifetime, right? So probably they won't end up doing animation at all, right? So for me, Animation 220 is precisely that, is to actually ingrain into them this process of thinking towards problem solving, because that is like the future, right? It's not that you learn Photoshop, but it's how do you actually deal with space, right? How do you, why perspective is important in realizing space? It's not Photoshop, it's how do you tackle the problem from a critical point of view through a thinking process, right? I think that's the essence of what you should actually learn through classical education in a comprehensive baccalaureate such as ours.
Yeah. So what Kim was saying, we can't keep them from doing that unless we spell that out in our syllabus. and I use the word cheat, but then I have to explain to them the difference between the word cheat in the industry and cheating in school. You don't want to cheat in school. But we use cheats in animation to make the process a little easier. So I'll have them using Flash, and I'm like, no. You don't get to use the line tool and the oval tool. You got to just draw that guy, you know. So I don't think there's any way we can stop them without like just specifically saying, no, not in this class. You can't do it. Yeah. But I also wanted to talk about what we were talking about during lunch. Jose's presentation was about team production, basically, about getting classes together to make a project as opposed to schools that just have the one student making one film. And I prefer the one student making one film system. That was the system that I was brought up in. And yet my department chair at Art Institute constantly has me teaching team classes, so I must do it well, but I hate it. I keep dropping hints to her. It's like, I really don't like teaching these. And she's like, hey, you want to teach another one of these?
Why do you hate it?
It's a very strong word. What I dislike is that you get stuck with people that aren't going to do their share. That's really the biggest problem, which doesn't happen in the industry.
Actually,
if you have someone that's not doing their part, they're not going to. They may be there for a little while, but they're not going to last.
Actually, they do.
That has not been my experience. I've worked with some. Some hacks, and they don't last very long. They're only there for a little while. They get a bad reputation, though they don't get rehired on the next project, and so on and so forth. And that's been my experience anyway. So it's a lot worse in a school situation, especially at the art institutes, where I think I can speak freely here. They let anybody in. So that's the main reason that it's difficult. It's a real challenge, just trying to get everybody to do something, to do their part, to do their equal part.
I find the hacks last because they're usually super charming. I find the hacks last usually because they're super charming. But they last a really, really long time. It takes a long time before people figure out that they're not pitching in. And it's probably like that with the student groups as well. And I mean, at the very least, it'll teach the other students how to deal with someone like that.
I think Ellen had a comment. Ellen?
It's taking me back to the other point. It may be relevant. I was going to point out that something we're dealing with, which is very unique to this current generation, is that they've grown up in a world where the technology is honored and the focus of things is getting more and more complex at the same time as the content is getting cheaper and more amateurish, and the idea of racing, the idea of good enough has been instilled in this generation. They've grown up with a lot of things being amateurs who are getting the same. You have all these incredible professionals, showcasing a person with very minimal talent. This is a very odd combination. This used to be a tiny portion of entertainment, is now a huge portion. And part of what we have to do is reinstill the idea of the difference the craft makes. And maybe even a process of letting them see if they're going on Photoshop and doing a cheap job, and then letting them, almost putting things side by side so they can actually begin, like the way when someone's learning to taste wine, it takes a while to distinguish between good and bad, or mediocre and great. And that part of it, we almost have a special task in this generation to train their senses to be able to see why it is more interesting to have something done well.
No, I agree on that. I want to talk a little bit more about Jose's thing about how people change jobs like 7 or 8 times, and I think the university system will allow them to come in as an animation major if that's what they're going to want to do, and realize that this is what I want to do, or this isn't what I want to do. You can't do that online. If most of the people that take online courses, honestly, if you look at the statistics, they don't finish their online courses. Most people that take them, because they're not committed. They're just in it because I want to do this cheap. I know what I want to do, and let me just get it in there. And those are the people that you need a community of people to tell you, to hold a mirror up to you and say, you suck, or you're really good, or this is what you're doing is pretty good. A lot of these people, they're in they're the big fish in whatever pond that they're in. And they think that they're amazing, but there's 10 billion of those people here in Hollywood. And if you don't know who your competition is, you can convince yourself that you're amazing and that you can do this job, and you'll get an overinflated sense of self. Like you could take a class from some amazing animation person who's teaching classes, and he'll be telling you, oh, you're amazing, you're great, now go get a job. If he can't get you a job, then who are you going to get a job from? And someone was telling me, 90% of the jobs out there are who you know. The other 10% don't exist. So if you're going online and you're trying to connect with people, I wish we could have like statistics about who gets jobs on these online courses. That would be interesting.
Okay, I was just going to say, as the mole, I just wanted to answer
no,
that.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. And
Okay, so as the mole, I have noticed that the thing that these students are craving the most is the online Facebook page that they have going, where they post their work and they talk to each other more than what happens in the class. So I do think that that is the answer. I do think that that is true. I mean, every job I've ever gotten in the business has been like, it started with, I got a job because my friend and I were in the same class at RIT, and he came out here, and so did I. And so I do think that that is valuable, and I do think that that is a large part. It's partially the critical thinking, as Dory said, and it's partially the community. But I just wanted to put that out there if anybody encounters it, that has been that's what I find in the online classes. You're right. It's about community, and I don't think a lot of people finish them. So.
One of the things that I love telling my especially my seniors, my graduate seniors, I always tell them, I said, look around the room. You're going to grow old with these people. I said, your husbands and wives will come and go. These are the people you're going to know for the rest of your life. And I think I'll just see. What's that? Yeah. That's right. Dory and I go back like 30 years, and Raul and I go back like over 25 years, and everything. So, and was it Mike's show just dropped it? Yeah. So Mike and I worked together on Lion King together, and all. So it's weird. It's like you just keep running into the same people, But I always tell people that. It's not just a who you know thing, because there's a certain amount of trust involved in animation, where when you hire somebody, you're wagering so many thousands of dollars in so many weeks that they know what they're doing, because it's going to take 2 or 3 weeks to figure out, oh, they're not working out, and you've lost the money and you've lost the time, which is more important. So it's always like, do you know this person? Do you know this person? This person doesn't take direction well, or this person's slow, or something like that. And yeah, sometimes I've turned down a superior artist because of the attitude, or because of the, I don't have time to be a babysitter. I got a film to do. I got to get footage done. Yeah. So there is kind of that kind of discussion, but forming alliances and social alliances and everything is it's part of the business. So I'm sorry, Angela.
I was going to answer, as a mother who has small children who's saving for college, one of the challenges I have is the cost of school. And part of the reason, as a mentor and somebody who does recruiting, that I don't often recommend certain schools anymore is because they're $45,000 a year. I can say this because my own school costs that much. In fact, there was an article out just this week about it. And I definitely built the alliances. My husband and I went to the same school. Most of my friends went to the same school. But I think that's one of the challenges many of you face, is the cost of school, period. And that is, I think, the allure of these online programs. And yes, some of them are very expensive, but the brick and mortar programs, they are very, very expensive. I've had PAs and coordinators that couldn't stay in their jobs because they couldn't afford to pay their student loans. They had to leave my department to go to another place to take on a job. That's how much it's impacting people coming out of school. So that's an ongoing challenge for everybody at every level. You know, economically, it won't matter if it's a Cal State or a private university. It's a challenge.
But one of the things that I want to point out also was I have a lot of friends that went to CalArts for a year, and they got their job because of who they found out, who they knew, who they did. It's like it comes from coming to a brick and mortar school. They could have, if they ditched that whole thing, they would have been lost trying to figure out what they're going to do, blah, blah, blah.
I'm not against brick and mortar schools, by the way.
Oh, no.
I just want to clarify. I'm just telling you that my own fear as a mother and looking at how much it costs, it's going to be very difficult for me to recommend to them that they need to go to a 4-year private institution that costs $100,000 a year, which might be what it is by the time they go.
Well, that's my fear as a father as well.
Yeah.
I'll say this. I teach at a community college, and it's $40 a credit, and they can come and take really cheap classes. I'm right across the street from CalArts, so I would say half of my students want to go to CalArts. They're actively trying to get into it, and you know, and I have a lot of my instructors taught at CalArts or still do, but a lot of times they get disillusioned. You know, they get disillusioned by the process, or they get disillusioned by the fact that they've applied 5 or 6 times and they've never gotten in. And then they begin to look elsewhere, and they begin to look around and see. Sometimes they go through an online school. A lot of times they'll go out of state or go to Cal State. So, and a lot of times they realize that because they've been told so many times that it's really about their portfolio and the work that they do, that they realize that it's not about the school only that they go to, even though we say, you know, there is a great value in education, but sometimes it's, you know, it's you have to get out of the nest eventually. So I think, and you, Joe, you teach at a state school like I do, so
we have like Canadian style tuition there.
Yeah, and it's
like $1,700 a semester.
That's Cal State as well. I mean, it's cheap enough, and the government grants subsidize a lot.
Yeah, it's
if you're in a certain bracket, you're not paying much at all. Actually.
Yeah.
Well, I teach at USC, and we're like $45,000 a year. actually, believe it or not, CalArts is more, which is it was an eye opener to me. I'm surprised. I thought we were the most expensive, because you know USC, University of Soaring Costs. You know, it's a famous one. University of Spoiled Children. You know, we got all those. We know all those ones. And but I got to say, as chair, one of the things that I'm learning is a lot of my time is spent on getting financial aid for students. It's like I spend more time going over scholarships and trying to bring in scholarships, and there's all kinds of weird scholarships. Like apparently Gary Cooper's estate has a scholarship for film students, but they have to be Native American. So it's like everybody's got like a weird little condition. Like there's another one called the Galloping Horse or something, with scholarship, which is only for Asian studies, for Asian artists from Asia and the Pacific Rim, and it's just weird that like you just get all these different little things and all. But
Gary Cooper one.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Hi, Melissa Graciano-Humphrey. I'm adjunct here at LMU, and then I also do some tutoring actually in Photoshop and other stuff. But no, I completely agree. But I think one thing is that I guess the answer yours would be tell them they can't use Photoshop, and that you can tell if they've used Photoshop, because usually you can. I wanted to kind of comment about the okay, let's see if I can remember what I was going to say. If you don't know your competition, how can you compete? I think a lot of the issues that I've seen in my students is not that they don't know their competition, excuse me, is that they are seeing a lot of the same things over and over and over again, and it reflects in their work. Like, this looks exactly like Miyazaki. This looks exactly like Legend of Korra. This looks exactly like whatever. And they're not expanding their knowledge base enough. Like, they're not watching enough live action. They're not watching anything before 1990. Like, and I think that it might be up to us to kind of not make them like sit and watch it like, you know, Clockwork Orange style, but like say, if you're interested in this, you should also watch this and this, and here it is in the library. Your homework for this week is to watch this. But again, that also goes back to how do we influence our students to be more creative, to think more, not just outside the box, but also in terms of new ways of creating animation, not just using the software for what its intended purpose was, but like, what if you did this with it? And kind of go that more experimental route, and try to have, I guess, more classes and encouragement in that. So like, even if they're telling a traditional type story, is like, okay, what else can you do with this? And actively challenging the decisions that they've made to really expand their knowledge.
Show them NFB films and get them to try the techniques.
Yeah, and that is a good point.
You know, I think the downfall is Google. Because
in some ways, yeah.
No, because as soon as any of them type in, you know, horse, they're all going to come to class with the same horse or the same visuals. So it does their thinking for them, but it doesn't think outside the box at all. It's like zeros and ones. So I force the students to go to the library. I feel like the library is this place where you are stuck by yourself with these books, and where your eye or your mind tells you to go, you go. And then all of a sudden there's a book beside it, and it catches you by complete surprise. It's like, oh, I didn't know about Le Corbusier, or I didn't know about this artist or this text. And all of a sudden it's like these wonderful happy mistakes keep happening to you and influence you. And then they come to class with something new that they didn't know before, and then all of a sudden they're teaching me, and it's like, wow, that's cool. What's that artist? So I think that's a great way to get them outside of their zone.
That's a good idea. I also wanted to comment really quick about the animation mentor and the other kind of online schools. I've heard some complaints that they can always tell when somebody comes from Animation Mentor or comes from like one of these schools, because a lot of their stuff looks the same and they act the same. I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. I don't know what the answer to that is, if there is one. But that's another kind of downside, I guess, to something like that. I mean, if you're in an institution where there's a lot of different people. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Because I'm going to make a short snide comment here.
Okay.
You can tell when somebody's been to CalArts.
That's true as well, yeah.
And Art Center.
That's true. That's very true.
Yeah.
To tell if you're trying to guide someone in the round, to have them, if they can go and see their demo reels and artwork, if it does all look the same, because this can happen in a mortar and brick school too. It just depends on the teaching style. If they are seeing it all looks, but they should be cautious about that. They're going to come out with too narrow an idea of what everything is, as opposed to a school that shows more variety. It's just in terms of directing students to a proper program, and part of how you sell the better programs is that you won't come out cookie cutter style.
Okay, well then let's turn the comment into a question. How do we get kids or students who always kind of have that narrow view and have them expand into different, I mean, not necessarily making them different than what they are, but saying like, okay, your stuff very much looks the same. So basically convincing them to try something new without actually quote unquote making them, because if you make them, they won't want to do it. So how do you encourage a student to try something new when you know that they're in a very specific rut and always have been?
I think that the problem is trying to answer that with technique, right? I mean, it goes back again to diversity and how is it that you're nurturing yourself from the diversity of the world and not being prejudiced about something. So if you're manipulated, indoctrinated, which is like the other part of creating group projects, is that without critical thinking, there's a process of indoctrination. So you end up being a mentor, animation mentor style of person, right? Because you're not bringing anything new into the into the art of animation, because you're just making a derivation and following instructions on how to do something. So there's no critical thinking there. The other thing that I would like to say is that actually I didn't pay tuition. I actually got paid to go to school in Czechoslovakia, and so because if you were a student there, you know. Socialist country when I was a student there. So, you know, communism is bad, capitalism is good. Yes, one of the greatest tragedies of the history of animation is the collapse of the wall. Right, there were no more money into animation. Czechoslovakia and all of them. So they ended up manufacturing TV commercials for the German television. Right. Yes. So the other thing that I would like to mention very quickly is that this concept of the logic of creative destruction of capitalism, and how, which I'm very worried about, like as mom is worried about, is the this concept that we have created about the value of education. What is the value of education? And what we ended up doing is that we're overpricing education. So the value of education is not in money or how expensive it's going to be. And it's, as everyone's saying, is going to be the next bubble after real estate is going to be education and universities. But in this logic of creative destruction, what is going to happen is that we are going to destroy the education system. And then what we are going to be left with is the silos online, where everyone is part of the machine in a process, and where it's better that you don't think because it's more effective.
So actually, I wanted to speak to the part of your presentation. I thought it was brilliant that you said, it was your words, here I am, this individual, and I want to make a film about diversity, but I want to do it all by myself in my little room with no other people. So my point is that his presentation is starting to win me over to the side of, yes, okay, I can teach team production classes. Because I think diversity is an excellent subject matter for a team production with students.
I just wanted to comment on what you'd said about like the value of education. And I think part of it is that right now, a lot of students think that you go to university and like university is a farm where you get to, you leave university and then you get a job. But they're not really thinking about the value of like what university is and how it's supposed to expand your mind and all that. And I guess we need to somehow make them think about that while we're preparing them for some kind of job market.
I wanted to just jump in, and this kind of relates, but also it's answering your question about what do you do with a student who says, I just want to do this one thing. And one of the things I've seen in my own colleagues is they're too often trying to say, I want you to think this way. And I think we need to start thinking a little bit more and listening to them. Students are sensitive and conscious to things that maybe us old folks aren't as aware of. And I know I've got a lot of students who love Japanese animation. They come in and they're just copying that manga. And I've got colleagues like, I hate anime, I hate this. And honestly, I enjoy Full Metal Alchemist and Cowboy Bebop, and most people love Miyazaki's films, and there are things about that I think are wonderful, and there are other things about the aesthetic maybe that I think aren't so great, but if you demonstrate that interest, and you show an interest in learning a little bit about what these students are excited about, you can help them to take that excitement and find what is really neat about what they're interested in, introduce to them to some stuff they've never seen before, whether it's UPA or old Disney or whatever, and they're going to be more open to what you share because you're participating, you're learning from them, and you're approaching them more like a colleague, and it's more of a conversation instead of, no, you're not allowed to draw that in my class. That's not permitted. Then you're going to get the rebellion. But if you demonstrate that interest and you work with them, you go places maybe you never thought you would go. So.
Well, I know this is just more old guys talking, but every single quarter or semester, I show the documentary from the mid-'80s, the one called Animating Art, that Richard Williams did about Art Babbitt. And Andreas Deja is interviewed in that. So it's Andreas 30 years ago. But he's talking about what Art told him, which was to live life, have a diverse range of interests, and go out and live your life and draw from that and put that into your art. And the example that I give them is Boondocks. I tell them that Boondocks, the guy's not copying anime, but you can tell it influenced him. So I encourage them to do that.
Right. And I just want to get one thing in. I was just curious about, because when we're talking about different forms and all, and this is just another thing about the balance between formal instruction and experimentation and all. But there's a great story I read years ago about when Henri Matisse was starting to teach, and like around the turn of the century, Matisse was like sort of on top of the newest movements. Like Picasso and Dali hadn't really come on the scene yet. Matisse was considered the cutting edge of the avant-garde. And as soon as the word got out that Matisse was going to start teaching, everybody's like, wow, this is great. And all these avant-garde young people from all around Europe all clustered around his villa because they all wanted to learn to like him. And they said, yeah, we went to traditional schools like the Beaux-Arts where they give you these plaster casts of Greek statues and you have to draw from the statues and all that stuff. And we want to learn the new stuff. We want to learn Fauvism and we want to learn Cubism. We want to learn all this stuff. So the first class Matisse does, he gives out the plaster casts. And he goes, learn this first. So the question is, it's like, formal training, how much formality versus how much experimentation? It's interesting.
That was actually, I'm wondering how many programs teach or have classes in the history of animation. Just so, great.
2 classes in the history of animation.
One so far,
And
yeah.
one
So
film history class.
yeah, and because I started teaching it probably 3 years ago, and I noticed that almost right away, students were not changing the way that they drew, but there was a wider variety of styles because they realized that there's a whole world out there, and it's not just what I know. So I was just curious to see who else was teaching that. So.
Yeah, no, I was saying the trick, I guess, is turn the tables around. It's like not that you go and force the students in teaching them a certain style, but the opposite. Ask the student to teach you something in terms of what is that interests you, and when the students show you that, not only can open doors into things that you never thought about it, but it really helped you to actually taking that reference point of what the student is interested and going and show and open wide a door to something else that the student probably didn't know. And I think that's really the most interesting thing in the experience of teaching between a student and a teacher is like it goes both ways. It's not just one. But, I learn as much as my students, I hope, every time I teach something. No?
One thing I was going to kind of add/ask about is it seems like electives, and giving them space to do things that aren't in their comfort zone helps. I find that students, if you tell them they can't do something, that is the worst idea because then they're going to fight you away, whether it's Photoshop or whatever. But I remember I taught, like I said, at a trade school for a while in motion graphics. And I had a color theory class, which nobody was excited about. And I took them all to the Getty, which was very hard to do. That was very hard to do in a trade school. They were like, why aren't you sitting at the computers learning the software? But I snuck them out to the Getty to show them fine art and look at the composition, look at the color, look at how this is working. And I had one student who could have cared less. The students would come, it was at the point by midday, he would come into a gallery and all the other students would exit out the other side because he was so difficult. And I found him, eventually, and I was like, why don't you just come with me? And we went to see a Caspar David Friedrich. And he was like, this would be so much cooler if there were orcs in it. And I was like, all right, okay, where do you think all that stuff, all that Rivendell, all of that, where did that come from? It came from here. And he just sort of looked at me. It was like a can opener opened. And he was like, are there more of these? I'm like, yes, next floor, up on the left. So it sometimes just presenting something new to them that they aren't aware of. And I mean, as a trade school, the kid made tractor parts before he came to my school. So it was try and show him something new that he'll be excited about.
I think you just made a really good point there, that what you actually did was you made a connection between what they know and what they don't know in order to make it interesting to them. In other words, it never occurred to them that those styles that they love, that they didn't just come out of, that they weren't just full born without those artists having influences. So the trace back built on a foundation of what they already love can be the way to really get them excited about new older work, newer work, whatever, and the recognition of how their favorite artists got where they are. I think it's just a fantastic point.
Yeah. I think, I remember I said I went to the School of Visual Arts in New York, and in our foundation year, they made us take a certain number of classes that we may not have probably chosen ourselves. Like we had to take a class in sculpture, we had to take a class in photography, things like that. And I remember taking the photography class and thinking, I don't want to do this. Like, why do I have to do this? I got to walk around the damn camera and take pictures and all. And it just seemed like a waste of time because I wanted to animate. And years later, I now realized that I learned a lot about frame composition. I learned how to frame things correctly and all. And at the time, you probably couldn't convince me, that this was of value. And now afterwards, I'm like, yeah, just like sculpture, you start to learn to think of things in 3D, because I know a lot of for a few years, a lot of the best Maya animators started in stop motion. People like Chris Wedge and Anthony Lamolinaro and everything. They were stop motion guys first because they were already thinking and timing in 3 dimensions. So.
I would like to go back to what you were saying about history of animation and how fundamental it is to our concept. Actually, we teach history of animation here in this movie theater, and there are 2 components which I found essential: the scale of the image, and again, community, right? Because it's like a communal experience where you're laughing with others at something that is happening in the screen. And so I think that it's completely different to actually have a history of animation class that is going online and you're watching a film with headphones and a small image, to actually revising, the format of Sleeping Beauty, anamorphic, and actually seeing the complete image to what it meant to be as a cinematic experience. And I think that we're also losing that. So it's something that I'm trying to preserve, and I'm always voting against having, for example, history of animation online, because I know what a difference makes when students actually, for the first time, get revealed what Snow White really is in watching it, not on a DVD. And the second thing about what Tom was saying is about experimentation, and there's this component that also I'm always trying to push, which is with this new, with the technology and this new generation, everything, there's like a mediation of space with the object, right? So I'm always talking about the physicality of animation, that you have to learn to touch things, and you have to come out from your little silo, and you have to move around, and you have to feel how your body moves, right? So I think that there's like 2 ideas about like what we need to fight for.
I was going to talk about, I teach character design, but I don't have them draw. I make them do things that, it's like if you want them thinking outside of the box, if you want them to do any kind of movement and such, I build it in the curriculum. Like one of the assignments that I have is go talk to someone that you would not normally talk to and interview them and then report back. My favorite one was this girl. She was out by that flagpole over there, and she saw this, she was this little animation girl. And she saw this sorority girl, this blonde, beautiful, tall woman. She scared the hell out of her, and I knew I had to talk to her because of that. So she went up to her and just started chatting, just interviewing her, this project. Anyways, by the end of it, after talking about like boys and people that they knew, she actually felt sorry for her. And it just did this whole thing where her expectations were, this girl is scary and I know nothing about her. But she was able to form some sort of connection. And the other thing that I like them to do in one of the other assignments is to take a serendipitous adventure. Like say you need to go somewhere, say yes to everything, and just take the turn left when you were going to turn right, but leave time and space for you to just discover and just keep your eyes open. And another random one was this twin. She decided, okay, I'm going to go to the mall. I go, what's weird about that? She goes, I went to the mall by myself without my sister. And what I realized was no one was looking at me. And I was like, wow, that's a really interesting thing, because usually she was with her sister and she's like this crazy thing. Everyone's always staring at her. She feels like a little celebrity, but she was anonymous. And she's like, that was just the weirdest thing. I'm like, you've been doing it your whole life, but you never really saw that. And I think that's really interesting. But just getting out of the box and having these preconceived ideas of what this experience is going to be, if you build that in the curriculum, it's like you get these kids thinking about, oh, what else can I do? And getting them excited about just discovering life. Because some of the kids that I've given this assignment to had never been out in LA. I'm like, really? You live in LA? This is an amazing town. You haven't been beyond like the Bluff or beyond this area. They're all, no, I'm just too busy doing my stuff here. I'm like, stop. It's ridiculous.
I want to throw out a question actually into the audience, and specifically to the Angela or the studio folks here, because I've struggled with this one. Okay, so we are all having seems to be a consensus here that our aims as professors is to help the students find themselves and their voice and give them more knowledge and experimentation. However, sometimes I'll sit in a panel with studio, reps or recruiters, and the key thing that the feedback I keep getting is they need the focus and they need very specific skills. And so that, with those answers, it leads me to believe that either the trade school approach or an approach that Animation Mentor and those places are doing is the successful way to go if you want to get into the studio system. So then, as an educator, all of a sudden I'm of two minds, because yes, I want students to get jobs, of course, but I also want them to find themselves as an artist. So it's a difficult one. I don't know that you have an answer, but I'm shooting it out to you.
I don't represent all the studios. They're all recruiters. Because as you know me, I sit on the fence of these things. Our studio pipeline is pretty specialized, and I think that's been the case for many, many years. I don't know if Tim's still here. I think there are areas where that's breaking down, where you'll find that they are starting to look for more generalists. Kim and I were having, I think this conversation earlier, I was having it with someone that, a lot of times when I look at portfolios, especially for art, specifically for BizDev, it's sometimes not the assignments that at the beginning parts, it's the end parts, their personal work that gets them the job because it says something about who they are and their interests and their abilities. But I don't know, I think every studio is unique in that, it depends on their pipeline, what they're going to tell you, and then what they think is happening at the studio. And I guess, how long does it take to be an amazing animator? I mean, it's a lifetime of work. So I think it is probably hard to become a master animator in 4 years, enough to go on to get a job at a studio. I think that's hard to expect on anybody. So, but I think when you start thinking about studios, they do have specific departments and they want you to specialize because they want you to, one, have an interest in that job. I think that's another challenge for a studio like ours or larger studios where they are very departmentalized, is that if you came in and say, well, I want to do everything, it's just like a student who comes in and says, I want to write, direct, and produce. And it's like, well, do you know what those jobs are? And I think for a studio, there's probably a little bit of that as well, where you think about, okay, if the person comes in and says they want to do everything, are they going to be happy just doing surfacing all day? I think that's a challenge. So I think that's where you get some of that. But I do think there are generalist opportunities. I don't think that that's gone, and I think it's maybe growing.
Well,
so I don't know if that answers your question, Aubry.
One of the things that I recognize at Disney and Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network is once you get in the door, once you're a character designer, once you're a storyboard artist, once you're whatever job that you are, the development department goes in and you're the new person. Do you have any ideas? Do you have anything that you want to do? A lot of these stuff, like I think Nickelodeon even put it out there, that they're having like an incubator type program where it's like, if you're in a studio, we want there to be a kind of a house style, and we're going to get our new shows from in-house talent. So a lot of them are looking for the shows because they've already taken a chance on you. They're like, okay, I've already invested this much money to have you at their studio, so we kind of trust that you know how the studio works and you know the people who you're working with. So once you're in, there's opportunities for you to branch out and do all kinds of different things, and they're actually pursuing you. But to get in, you need to be specialized. And you need to know what you're doing. You can't come in as the jack of all trades because they have no idea what to do with you.
I'd say that's true.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting with our business today is that, in the 1990s, whatever, like 20 years ago, everybody coming out of school wanted to be Glenn Keane, now they all want to be Seth MacFarlane, You know, they were like I want to leave here, make a TV series, produce it, become rich. And it's like, great. It's easier to be a movie star, but it's like, but you know, yeah. What I find interesting too, the other thing that's changed, at least in the years that I've been around, is that in this when I started, you know, in the '70s, people were sort of in their like look for a niche and got into the niche and stayed there. So if you did commercials, you didn't do features, and if you did features, you didn't do TV. You know, I mean, I was joking before with before I was saying I remember dating a girl who her big thing was she got the graphic on the ABC Evening News. So behind Peter Jennings, it goes crisis in the Middle East, and she would get to write Middle East with like an explosion and barbed wire, and you know, 38 years doing the picture behind the anchor. That was her career. That's it. You know, she's happy. But, you know, I think what's happened now is that, you know, I'll think of somebody like T. Dan Hofstede, where it's like T. Dan was an animator on Beowulf, then he was working on Spider-Man 2, then he was working on Princess and the Frog, then he was working on games, then he was at Disney TV. And there seems to be more movement now, where people are moving freely between the disciplines, and you hear the term CG generalist on a lot of stuff now. So it's like, are we training for that, or are we training for an older form? Yeah.
Well, the one thing that I also want to point out is that Hollywood's good at telling Hollywood stories. Like you just said, everyone wants to be Seth MacFarlane. They want to come out of college, and they would like to have their own show and make lots of money. At Hanna-Barbera, it was me and Seth MacFarlane were the two people that came straight out of college and we didn't get our own shows. He worked for years. He worked on my show. He learned his craft. He learned how to do better storyboarding. He learned how to tell stories. He was working at Disney Television on Jungle Cubs, writing on that. You're like, they don't tell these stories. They went immediately into whatever they did. I think teachers need to be able to tell their students what the Hollywood story is and what is the reality in terms of getting a job. And it comes from hard work, getting in the door. That's the main thing, is getting in the door. Once you're in the door, then you can start making your way and navigating into what you really want to do. But until you get in that door, no one's going to hand you $1 million and say, have your own show. They didn't do that to him at all. They saw his student film. I don't know if anyone ever saw Seth's student film, which is pretty much how that's how he came actually to Hanna-Barbera. He won the Freddie Award, the Fred Flintstone Award from RISD. And so we were developing shorts, and we brought him out, and it was that was his start. It was a student film.
I remember like Peter Chung, who did Eon Flux. We worked for a while together at Ruby Spears. You know, he was doing layouts on like Fang Face and, you know, Foofer and like all these like cheap shows and stuff. And you know, John Kay put his time in too. You know, doing layout and stuff like that. So it's sort of a myth that you kind of just like come right out and just erupt right into a TV series. You know.
Hello. I think we're going to start winding down as this microphone winds down. You know what? Just listening to this conversation, I think we can all agree that we're all like-minded people, want our students to do better, and I think we should all take a class together because we learned tons in this group. We have something very special now from ASIFA-Hollywood's Animation Educators Forum that we've been working on for quite a while, and Dory Littell-Herrick is going to talk about it.
So this is kind of a great segue for those of you who are worried about how you're going to pay for school. We can't provide you with a lot of money, but ASIFA-Hollywood and the Animation Educators Forum is proud to announce and introduce the ASIFA-Hollywood Animation Educators Forum Scholarship Fund. And this year we have a scholarship pool of up to $30,000 to distribute. So we've been meeting in a committee and talking about how we wanted to do this, and here's some of what we have decided. So our scholarships are going to be merit-based, and they're designed to support college students who are continuing their education in the field of animation. So there are a lot of freshman scholarships aimed at getting students to go to college, and then especially if you're a chair, you are aware of the retention problem. It can be hard to keep students in college. So we were going to go towards that area. So we're figuring on awarding $2,500 to $5,000 scholarships that could be applied to tuition or books and supplies or animation hardware and software, because often that laptop makes the difference between being able to succeed or not, and can also be applied to supporting a senior or a graduate thesis project. And all scholarship award winners will receive a one-year associate membership to ASIFA-Hollywood. So we're in the process of developing an online system, much like the Annie Awards, if any of you have jumped online to judge Annie Awards or to vote on Annie Awards, to allow people to apply online. And this will also allow us to accept applications from really around the world. So this is sort of what we're looking for. We're not going online for about 2 to 3 more weeks because we're in the process of funding and building the site now. But this is the kind of stuff we're looking for. We want a short introductory bio from the students so we know who they are. So character designers can pull out their bio, ready to go. We want a proposal for what the scholarship is for. How will the student use it and how will it help them in building themselves as their goals in animation? We want either or a 2-minute reel or 10 pieces of still art, and letters of recommendation from a faculty advisor, and a member of any ASIFA chapter. Now that could end up being one recommendation letter, I suppose, but it could also often be 2 recommendation letters. So if we're talking to somebody from the East Coast and their advisor is a member of the East Coast chapter of ASIFA, we're accepting that, not just ASIFA-Hollywood membership. So the applications are going to be due by the end of May, and we will put out a big announcement when we're actually got the site up online. It'll be on the forum. ASIFA will blast it out on the ASIFA-Hollywood list, and we will be looking for other ways to get the word out that we have scholarships in that area. And we'll want to have the applications in by the end of May, and we'll have a committee of judges, much like we judge the Student Annie Award, to pick the scholarships, and we will be handing them out in July. So watch for more details. ASIFA has graciously given us this money to create ASIFA-Hollywood, to create these scholarships. We have the ongoing intention to give out scholarships every year. It will depend on the discretionary funds in ASIFA as to how much money that is that we're giving out. But our intention is to continue an ongoing scholarship fund to help support students. So a lot of hard work behind it. Thank you to the steering committee and all the members who've helped me with it. So.
And that's our show. I want to thank our guest speakers and our presenters and from Canada and here, and all you guys for showing up on a Saturday. It's amazing the passion that's in this room. Great work. Let's go.